Now you might think that stopping is such a simple feature it doesn't need to be discussed at all, and in the last demo we saw an example of stop being called on the iWavePlayer interface and also handling the playback stopped event. But there's a number of considerations you need to take into account when you're dealing with stopping in your application. First of all, there's a subtle difference between pausing and stopping. When you call pause, the sound card might actually be halfway through playing a buffer. And what the sound card does is it keeps its position within that buffer, so that when you press play again to resume, it carries on playing from the exact same point in the buffer that you were. You don't miss any audio at all. Whereas when you press stop, that flushes the buffers completely. And so when you play again, the sound card has got to go back to the source wave provider and ask for more data. You might miss a tiny bit of the audio, although most users won't notice this, because we're only talking a number of milliseconds. However, if you decide you're going to use pause so you don't miss anything, there is a gotcha you need to be aware of. If the user presses pause and then repositions in the file and then presses play again, the sound card is going to carry on playing the buffer that it was originally playing while you paused, which will be from a different place in the file that we're currently up to. So if you go into pause and the user repositions, you probably then want to stop, and then when they press play, go back into play from a stopped state again. How does the iWavePlayer know when to stop playing? Well, it will carry on playing as long as the read method keeps on returning data. By convention in N-Audio, the read method should never return less than the number of bytes asked for unless you've got to the end. Then it can return less, and after you've got to the end, it must always return 0. So when the iWavePlayer realises we've got to the end because read returns 0, then it stops playback. Now, not all wave providers actually have an end. Some of the wave providers in N-Audio, or ones you make yourself, might never return 0 from the read method, in which case playback will never stop until you call the stop method. If you're trying to detect when you've got to the end of the file you're playing, one thing that you might think of trying is continually checking the position of the wave stream that you're playing. And when position reaches length, then you know you've got to the end. But just because you've got to the end of the wave stream doesn't mean the sound card has finished playing it all. You see, the sound card is going to read from the wave stream and then play it. So position will get to the end of the wave stream before the sound card has finished playing it. So if you want to be sure that the sound card has got to the end, wait for the playback stopped event. And the playback stopped event is fired in 3 cases. It's fired when you call stop explicitly. It's fired when waveprovider.read returns 0, so it's auto-stopping. And it's also fired when playback stops because of an error. One very common cause of this is if you were playing audio through a USB headset and the user pulls the headset out. It can't keep playing into that audio device, and so playback stops, and the event args contain the exception that was thrown. N-Audio will always try to raise the playback stopped event on the GUI thread, and it uses the synchronization context class in the .NET framework to do this. And this means you can safely update elements of your GUI in the event handler. And if you're going to dispose the input stream and the wave provider, a good place to do it would be in the playback stopped event. If you call waveplayer.stop and then immediately try and dispose the input stream, the MP3 file reader in our example, then you may find that that causes an exception because the sound card may actually still be trying to read from that file. Just like play indicates that we should begin playing, stop simply means we've requested a stop. So after you come out of the stop method, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have finished playback just yet. It's always safest to wait for the playback stopped event to be raised.